Welcome to Validation Science. Unit 1, Quality and Regulatory Affairs, and this is Lesson 1, GMP recap. The overview of this lesson, we're going to be covering the concept of GMP, looking at regulatory guidelines and GMP requirements and components. GMP stands for Good Manufacturing Practices, as you remember from your previous unit. The C in GMP is really important because that lets us know that we're talking about current good manufacturing practices. As far as the regulators are concerned, if most of an industry is doing a particular task or process in a certain way, then their expectation is that all of the industry would conform to that standard. And the current is giving you the idea that it's dynamic and it's always changing in the environment. GXP is the set of terms that we use for all of the different types of manufacturing practices. We have the GMP, which we mentioned already. We have GCP, which is for good clinical practices. This is around when they're doing clinical trials for new products, new drugs. GLP, good laboratory practices, so how the labs are run. GDP, good distribution practices for how things are tracked and disseminated across the industry and how products are tracked. It's also called good documentation practices and more locally on the sites as well. So that would be something you'd probably come across. GEP, good engineering practices. What is current good manufacturing practices, or CGMP? It's the part of quality assurance which ensures that products are consistently produced to the quality standards appropriate for their intended use and as required in the product specification or in the marketing authorization. So that is coming from the Volume 4 EU Guidelines on Good Manufacturing Practices. The fundamental concepts of GMP. The first one is that things have to be consistent. You can only have confidence in a process if it leads to the right result every time, and consistency in a pharmaceutical environment is critical. If things aren't consistent, then there's question marks over how things are made and if there's errors occurring. Continual improvement. So what's acceptable today mightn't be acceptable next year. So this is where the word current comes from. So it's the expectation is from the industry and from regulators is that we're always trying to improve and always trying to get a better handle on our processes. GMP is not related to health and safety of employees, and it's not related to production efficiency either, but they are intertwined because there are some knock-on effects in certain circumstances for both. A product is fit for its intended use when it has the correct quality, safety, and efficacy. That means it's fit for its intended purpose. And this is a term that you hear used in the GMPs a lot, fit for intended use. So we're pretty familiar with what we mean by quality, and we're pretty familiar by what we mean by safety. So the drug has to be safe. It can't have any unexpected side effects relating to it. Efficacy is the therapeutic effect that it has, so the part of the drug that actually does the job. Current good manufacturing practice. A medicine or device is of the right quality when it's designed properly, when it's manufactured correctly according to the validated status, according to the procedures that are outlaid for its manufacturing, when it's conforming to all its specifications. So there are defined specifications for every product type, and they might be things like the content of it, how many milligrams of active there should be in it, the uniformity of it, how consistent is it across a batch, the stability of it, how long will it last for, the correct dimensions in terms of if you're talking about medical device or other things like that. It obviously needs to be free from contamination, and you can have 3 different types of contamination. There can be chemical contaminants, so these might be detergents, other products, cleaning agents, and there can be physical contamination. So if you had shearing of a screw or something like that where you got metal particles into your product, that would be a physical contaminant. And then you can have biological contamination, so microorganisms, other molds, funguses, things like that you obviously don't want in any of your products. They also have to be packaged appropriately. The packaging is really important because the packaging has all of the details about the batch and it contains the traceability of it as well. And if that's not done properly, you'll end up having issues with traceability. And that comes into their labeling as well. So the two of those are intertwined together. The rationale for CGMP. Well, number one, there's very little chance of a doctor or a patient noticing that there's anything wrong with the product because they're given either a liquid in a vial or they're given a tablet, and it's very hard for them to know if there is chemical contamination in it or if there's microbiological contamination in it or if there is an underdose of the active or overdose of the active ingredient. They're not going to be able to tell that from looking at your product. People that are using the medicines or the medical devices are doing so on the trust. So they're trusting, number one, in their doctor because they've prescribed this medicine, but they're also trusting in their manufacturer. So that's why people tend to stick a lot of the time with the brand names rather than going with generics in some cases because they know a manufacturer, they feel confident in it. But across the board, they should feel confident in the whole industry that the quality products are being produced. The outcome, if an error occurs, could be disastrous. In a minor case, you've got anxiety of the patient because they're a bit worried about what might happen to them because there's a problem. There's loss of trust in the product and there's loss of respect for the industry. In a major way, if you have a proper problem, you have incorrect or faulty product, that could actually have very serious consequences. There could be deterioration in the health of the patient. They might develop a secondary illness as a result, and in some cases, patients have even died from products that they have taken. The major impact for the company, obviously, if there is a problem that's very serious, the product will have to be recalled from the marketplace. That's done in a very public arena, and it has a lot of negative PR for a company, as well as the cost that the company is inflicted with about having to do the recall itself. Generally, you could end up with litigation as a result of that too, and potentially you could have a shutdown of a site or a plant as a result. When we test a product, there are weaknesses inherent in that testing. Why would you think that might be? Well, when we're testing a product, we're only testing a sample of the batch. We can't test the entire batch because most tests are degrading. So you can't check for everything that has an error as well. Things could happen that are outside of the scope of what you might think is possible. Things just happen. There's also human error in testing. People can make mistakes, even unbeknownst to themselves. So the GMPs are there in place to protect the patient, number one. That's our biggest concern. Just to give you an example, in Cork we're very lucky. We've got a lot of pharmaceutical companies and biopharmas. There's two here, just to give you an idea, MSD Brenny and Lilly and Kinsale, two well-established, very prominent manufacturers in the area. Just to give you an idea about the number of operations that occur on a site, this is the Brenny site layout. So here we've got the API fermentation suite, we've API purification here, there's pegylation, sterile filling, there's sterile filling drug product OSP2, laboratories, micro, bioassay, chemistry and HPLC. There's materials in the warehouse, wastewater treatment plant, chemical storage where there's recycling and solvent storage. The utilities that you would have in any site, including the boiler house, then the admin group, so you've got IT, finance, material engineering. Services, where you've got the administration occurring. The development space, they've biotech API, and there's biotech API MABs as well. The development space here, again in this building, there's biotech API MABs. So you can see there's quite a large number of unit operations occurring in a site. On this particular site, you've got manufacturing, you've got a bioactive pharmaceutical ingredient, so that's API manufacturing, production occurring. There's a biotech drug product production by sterile filling, and there is primary packaging into vials and multi-dose presentations. You've got the quality control. They look after the incoming materials, environmental monitoring, the in-process sampling, the release and the stability testing as well. And then you've got a technical and R&D group. So these guys are looking after the product and the process development, inward technology transfer, scaling up of new products coming in or optimizations from phase 1 to clinical trials right through to the commercialization of products. They also look after some of the regulatory stuff. So you've got the FDA, the INB, EMA approvals, process changes and the auditing. The requirements of GMP probably aren't anything you wouldn't have encountered before, but in the pharmaceutical and biopharmaceutical industries, they're really critical. They ensure that our drugs are safe for patients and have no unintended side effects. So one, you have to have written instructions. So this will be mainly your SOPs and your testing methods and all of those types of instructions you would have in a pharmaceutical plant. So it's great to have instructions, but if we're not following them, they're not worth the paper they're written on, so they need to be followed. Everything in this industry has to be highly documented. The document is the evidence to our regulators that we did things the way we were supposed to do them. If we can't produce the document to say an instrument was calibrated, maintained, or a process was done in a certain way, it doesn't matter to them. As far as they're concerned, it didn't happen. The facilities and the equipment we use obviously have to be appropriate for the task that we're doing. We have to make sure we maintain them, both in terms of cleanliness, but also in terms of calibration maintenances. We have to do validation for our equipment and also for the testing practices that we have to make sure that they work consistently. Employees are expected to demonstrate their job competence. So this is done through a combination of education, so what you might have done prior to your work life there, the training that you got on the job, and the experience that you have in other companies or other industries or other parts of the site. Obviously, it's a given we have to ensure appropriate cleanliness across a manufacturing site. We need to build quality into the products through process control and through continual improvement at all times. And it's expected as well that every site will audit themselves, do self-auditing for compliance and performance, so that they're ahead of the game in terms of identifying any weaknesses that they might have on site and correcting those on a really proactive basis. So check your understanding. Take a minute or two to answer these questions. What does the C in the CGMP stand for? Why does the industry require GMPs? List 3 of the golden rules of the GMPs.